Hello everybody. So in this video, we are going to review how to solve quadratic equations by factoring. This is one of 4 different ways to solve quadratic equations. We'll go over the other 3 ways later. Today, we're just going to focus on solving quadratic equations by factoring, okay? And how we're going to do this is I need you to have a blank piece of paper. It's a nice blank white piece of paper. If it's lined, that's fine. If it's white or blank, that's better. But get a blank piece of paper. And then as you can see, as I've done with this piece of paper, you're going to fold it in half. Hamburger style. And then we're going to fold it in half again. So it'll look like this. And when you unfold it, it will be in 4 different sections. Okay, this is what we are going to use to review solving quadratic equations. I'm hoping that this will be a good reference for you over the next couple of weeks as you prepare for the test, to remember how to solve quadratic equations by these different methods. Okay, so fold your paper into quarters. And now I will show you what we're going to write on it. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. Okay, awesome. Okay, so here your paper, this is your paper, but digitally. Yours will be split into 4 different sections with lines that look much straighter than mine. But I think you'll get the idea. Okay, at the top of your paper, I want you to write solving quadratic equations. Okay, and like I said in this video, we are going to talk about the first way that we learned how to do this, which is solving by factoring. So everything I write on here, I want you to write on your paper. Make it look nice, make it look organized, do whatever is logical for you, but this is what you are going to use as a way to review, to remember, to reference. So do whatever you need to make it something that you can use, okay? When solving quadratic equations by factoring, here are the steps that we use. Step 1, we set the equation equal to 0, right? Because 0 is our favorite number when dealing with factoring. Step 2, we're going to factor. And step 3, we then set each factor equal to 0. Okay, awesome. So then let's add an example to your page. So the example we are going to do is x squared minus 7x minus 21 equals 9. So our first step is to set it equal to 0. So we're going to take our equation, and to set it equal to 0, we've got to subtract 9 from both sides. So we get x squared minus 7x minus 7x minus 30 equals 0. And that was what we wanted, was it to be equal to 0. Step 2 is to factor. You guys are pros at this. So this one has 3 terms. We can use an x puzzle, negative 30 on top, negative 7 on bottom. Two numbers that multiply to negative 30 and add to negative 7 will be negative 10 and 3. Since our leading coefficient is 1, we can just go ahead and write that in factored form. So this will be x subtract 10 times x plus 3 equals 0. And now that it's factored, we can move on to step 3. In step 3, we set each factor equal to 0. So the factors are the things being multiplied together. So one of the things being multiplied together is x equals 10, so that's one factor. And the other factor is x plus 3. So we're going to go ahead and set both of those equal to 0. And then we need to think, okay, what value of x is going to make this true? Well, if x is 10, then 10 minus x is 0. And if x is negative 3, then that equation will be true. And those are our two solutions that we found by factoring. Okay, awesome. Make sure you have all of that recorded on your little, we're going to call this a graphic organizer. Okay, in class you should have gotten a piece of paper as part of your homework that has a couple problems that you need to work on through this video. So we're going to go ahead and do those problems now. Your paper should look something like this. So we're going to do the first 4 together. Make sure you write down all of the steps, and then you're going to do the last 6 on your own. All right, so this first one, we need to solve by factoring. So our first step is to set it equal to 0. Luckily for us, this one is already equal to 0. So we can just go ahead and move on to step 2, which is to factor. When we factor, we always start by finding the greatest common factor. Here, that's going to be 2. So we get x squared minus x minus 56. That's still equal to 0. We're going to factor that middle piece. So we have negative 56 on top, negative 1 on bottom. Two numbers that multiply to 56 and add to negative 1. So that's going to be 8 and 7. Our 8 will need to be negative. Because our leading coefficient is 1, we can go straight to the factors. And then step 3 is to set each factor equal to 0. Okay, a lot of students get confused by this extra 2 out front. And the way that we handle that is when we have a bunch of things being multiplied together that equal 0, we know that the only way for that to be 0 is if one of those things is 0. So if this 2 right here was a 0, then this would come out to be 0, right? But 2 will never be 0. That's just never going to happen. So from this point on, we can kind of ignore the 2. We don't really need to worry about it anymore. The only things that we need to set equal to 0 are the things with x's in them. So we'll do x minus 8 equals 0, x plus 7 equals 0. And what are the values that makes those true? For the first one, it's an 8. For the second one, it's a negative 7. So our solutions here are 8 and negative 7. All right, for this second one, our first step is to set everything equal to 0. So let's just go ahead and move everything to one side. So we'll add 3 to both sides, subtract 13x from both sides. So we get 6, subtract 13x plus 6x squared equals 0. Okay, and then this is really important. We need to make sure that this thing right here needs to be in standard form. Otherwise, we're going to factor it wrong. Every time we've factored, it's been in standard form, so we need to make sure that we change this so that it is. It's not currently in standard form, so if we rewrite it, we'll have 6x squared minus 13x plus 6 equals 0. I'm actually going to go ahead and move this arrow since this is actually the one that's in standard form. Now that it's in standard form, we can go ahead and factor it. there's 3 terms. So on the top will be a 36, on the bottom will be a 13, negative 13. We need two numbers that multiply to 36 and add to 13. What are those going to be? Let's find our factors of 36. We've got 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and I think that's the key. We've got -4 and -9. Our leading coefficient here is not a 1, so we got to factor by grouping. So we'll rewrite our middle term, left 6x squared minus 4x minus 9x plus 6 equals 0. Greatest common factor of the left side is 2x, so we're left with 3x minus 2. Greatest common factor of this right side is -3, so we're left with 3x minus 2. Again, all of that is equal to 0. These two things are the same, which is awesome, so we can factor them out. So we'll have 3x minus 2 times 2x minus 3 equals 0. So now we finish the factor step, so our final step is to set each of those equal to 0. Here, it's not immediately obvious what the values of x need to be to make those statements true, so we can just go ahead and solve. So we'll add 2 to both sides. We get 3x equals 2. Divide by 3. I'm going to write these up here. We get x equals 2/3. And then over here, if we add 3 to both sides, 2x equals 3. Divide by 2. We get 3x. And those would be our solutions. Okay, awesome. Question number 3. So again, we are trying to solve by factoring. So our first step is set it equal to 0. So we'll need to add 10 to both sides. So we get 4x squared minus 100 equals 0. We've got that 0, so we feel good. So then our next step is to factor it. We have two terms here, so we need to look for perfect squares. These two things do in fact look like perfect squares. The thing that multiplies together to get 4x squared is 2x. And 10 and -10 will give us that -100. So we can rewrite this as 2x plus 10 times 2x subtract 10 equals 0. And now that we've got it factored, we're just going to go ahead and set each of those factors equal to 0. So 2x plus 10 equals 0, 2x minus 10 equals 0. And again, if that isn't immediately obvious, just go ahead and solve it. 2x equals 10, divide by 2. And here we get x equals 5. Here we can add 10 to both sides. So we get 2x equals 10. I apologize over here. This one was negative, so we got a -5. Divide by 2, divide by 2. So we get x is equal to positive and -5. Okay, our final example for this video is number 4. Our first step is to set it equal to 0. We're in luck because it already is. So then our second step is to factor it. We need to look for the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor here is 3x. So we'll be left with 3x plus 1 equals 0. So then we can go ahead. At this point, we can't factor it any further. So we know that we're done with that step. So our last step is to set each factor equal to 0. And this one's a little bit different, but the principle is the same. We still have two things being multiplied together. Two things being multiplied together. So we can set each of those factors equal to 0. So 3x equals 0 and 3x plus 1 equals 0. The value of x that makes this first one true will be 0. For this second one, I would need to solve that. So we subtract 1, 3x equals -1, divide by 3, divide by 3. We're going to get as our final answer x equals 0 and -1/3. All right, those are all of the examples that you need to do from the video. Now you're going to go ahead and solve these next 6 problems. Do note that the answers are on the back, but please use them wisely. Don't just write the answers down. In fact, you can't. In order to get credit, you have to show all of your work. So go ahead and solve those, and then check your answers to make sure if you did it right. If you didn't, go back and see if you can find your error. And as always, if you need help, let me know and I'd be happy to help you.